Prince Tavor stood on the observation deck of his flagship, staring at the holographic display that showed the expanse of space before him. 200 warships floated in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. This was the 7th conquest fleet of the Valthrus Empire, and it belonged to him. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon was under his command. He smiled, feeling the weight of his authority and the certainty of his coming victory. Beside him, his younger brother Prince Kelnus watched the same display with less enthusiasm. Kelnus was careful where Tavor was bold, thoughtful where his brother was impulsive. He glanced at the data scrolling across the screen, numbers and statistics about their target: humanity. A young species, barely 3 centuries into space travel. Their colonies were small, their fleets even smaller. By all accounts, this should be the easiest conquest the Valthrus had ever undertaken. Commander Velron entered the observation deck. His old face creased with concern. He had served the Valthrus Empire for 40 years, seen a dozen conquests, and survived battles that had killed younger, more confident warriors. He bowed respectfully to the princes before speaking. "My lords, I have reviewed the intelligence reports on the humans once more. I must advise caution." Tavor turned from the display, his expression darkening. "Caution? Against this species? Commander, look at the numbers. They have 40 warships protecting 7 colonies. We have 200 ships, each one superior in firepower and shielding. What caution is needed?" Velron chose his words carefully. "The humans are different from other species we have conquered. My lord, they unified their homeworld through warfare. Their entire history is conflict, strategy, adaptation. They may be young, but they are experienced in ways we should not dismiss." Prince Kelnus nodded slowly, but Tavor laughed. It was a harsh sound that echoed in the large chamber. "You speak of primitives as if they were equals, Commander. Every species fights before they are conquered. Every species believes themselves strong. Then they meet the Valthrus, and they learn the truth of their weakness." The holographic display shifted, showing the human colonies scattered across 3 star systems. Small worlds, mining operations, research stations. Nothing that suggested real military power. Tavir pointed at them dismissively. "These humans have refused to acknowledge our messages. They ignore our demands for submission. This insult cannot stand. The Imperial Court expects us to bring these worlds into the Empire quickly and with minimal loss. We will do exactly that." Velron bowed again, knowing his advice would not be heeded. "As you command, my lord." As the commander left, Kelnus moved closer to his brother. "Tavira, perhaps we should send a smaller force first. Test their defenses. Understand their capabilities." Tavor's eyes flashed with irritation. "You sound like Velron. Fearful. Weak. Father sent us here to prove ourselves worthy of our titles. Every eye in the Imperial Court is watching. If we hesitate, if we show uncertainty, our rivals will use it against us. Morven already whispers that we are too young for this command." Kelnus fell silent. He knew his brother was right about the politics. High Counselor Morven had opposed their appointment, arguing that the princes were inexperienced. Any sign of weakness would give Morven the ammunition he needed to discredit them before. Emperor Drachnus. The fleet began its advance toward human territory. The journey took 3 days, 3 days during which Tavera became increasingly confident and Kelnus increasingly worried. The intelligence reports painted a picture of humanity that did not match other conquered species. Where others had shown fear, humans showed silence. Where others had begged for mercy, humans prepared their defenses. Where others had scattered, humans consolidated. On the 3rd day, they reached the border system. Arcturus Prime, the humans called it, a mining colony orbiting a yellow star, valuable for its rare metals and strategic location. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. A wall of metal and energy that blocked out the stars. Tavor activated the communication array, broadcasting his message across all frequencies. "Humans of Arcturus Prime, you stand before the 7th conquest fleet of the Valthrus Empire. Your refusal to acknowledge our sovereignty ends now. Surrender your colony, swear loyalty to Emperor Drachnus, and you will be spared. Resist, and you will be destroyed. You have 1 hour to respond. They waited. The hour passed in silence. No transmission came from the colony. No delegation appeared to negotiate. Nothing. Tavor's patience evaporated. They mock us with their silence. Prepare the vanguard. 50 heavy cruisers will advance and secure the colony. Destroy any resistance. The vanguard separated from the main fleet, 50 massive warships moving toward the small colony. Their shields glowed with power, their weapons charged and ready. This was how the Valthrus conquered. With an overwhelming force that left no room for hope or resistance, then the sensors detected something. 6 small ships emerging from behind the colony's largest moon. Human scout ships, tiny compared to the Valthrus cruisers. On the tactical display, they looked like insects facing a stampede. Tavor laughed again. And this time several officers on the bridge joined him. 6 ships. They send 6 ships against 50. Their bravery is admirable, but their intelligence is questionable. Vanguard Commander, you may destroy them at your leisure. Prince Kelnus studied the tactical display more carefully. Something felt wrong. The human scouts were not fleeing. They were not even taking defensive positions. Instead, they were moving in a strange pattern, weaving between positions as if waiting for something. Brother, look at their formation. It is unusual. Tabor barely glanced at the screen. It is desperation. They know they cannot win, so they perform some final ritual before their deaths. Let them have their moment. The vanguard advanced, their weapons locking onto the small human ships. The scouts began to move, accelerating toward the asteroid field that surrounded Arcturus Prime. The Valthrus ships followed. Confident in their superiority, Captain Dabin sat in the command chair of his scout ship, watching the Valthrus cruisers pursue them into the field. Beside him, Lieutenant Hygen monitored the weapon systems while Corporal Minciok tracked the enemy positions with perfect precision. They are following the predicted path, Minciok reported. His voice calm despite the 50 warships chasing them. Dabin nodded. Good Hygen, activate the field on my mark. Let us show them what happens when you underestimate humanity. The 6 scout ships dove deeper into the asteroid field. The Valthrus vanguard closed behind. On the Valthrus flagship, Tavor watched with satisfaction as his ships closed in for the kill. Then the asteroids lit up with weapons fire, and the battle truly began. Prince Tavar's smile vanished as 30 of his vanguard ships exploded in the span of 10 minutes, and he realized that everything he believed about this easy conquest was a lie. The asteroid field of Arcturus Prime had always been considered worthless by most species, just rocks floating in space, too scattered to mine efficiently, too chaotic to navigate safely. The Valthrus Vanguard commander had dismissed it entirely when planning his pursuit of the human scouts. That dismissal would cost him his life. Captain Dabin watched his tactical display as the 50 Valthrus cruisers entered the killing zone. Each asteroid on his screen showed a small green indicator, invisible to enemy sensors, but clear as day to him. Those indicators represented weapon platforms, carefully hidden and perfectly positioned over the past 6 months. Humanity had known the Valthrus would come. They had prepared accordingly. All ships. Execute dispersal pattern 7, Dabin commanded calmly. The 6 human scout ships suddenly broke formation, each one accelerating in a different direction with maneuvers that should have been impossible for vessels of their size. The Valthrus ships tried to track them, their massive hulls turning slowly to follow. Their weapon systems struggling to lock on to targets, moving with such unpredictable speed. Lieutenant Wajin counted down from her weapon station. 5 seconds to activation. 4, 3, 2, 1. Mark. The asteroids came alive. Hidden panels opened on dozens of rocks, revealing weapon batteries that had been waiting in silence. Railguns, plasma cannons, and missile clusters all fired simultaneously. The targeting data had been calculated weeks ago, updated constantly by AI systems that tracked Valthrus movements and predicted their responses. Every shot hit exactly where it needed to. The first, Valthor's cruiser exploded when 3 railgun rounds punched through its shields and detonated its main reactor. The second lost its engines to a cluster of plasma fire. The third tried to turn away but flew directly into a missile barrage that tore its hull apart. Within 30 seconds, 10 cruisers were gone. On the Valthor's flagship, Prince Tavor stood frozen, staring at the tactical display in disbelief. Red icons were vanishing from the screen faster than he could count. Alarms blared across the bridge. Officers shouted reports about shield failures, reactor breaches, and catastrophic losses. "Return fire," Tavor screamed. "All ships, return fire immediately." The Valthor's cruisers tried to respond, but they were in disarray. The Vanguard commander's ship was one of the first destroyed, leaving the remaining vessels without coordination. Some fired at the asteroids, wasting energy on rocks that held no vital systems. Others tried to retreat, only to collide with ships behind them. A few managed to lock onto the human scouts. But the small ships moved with such precision that the heavy weapons could not track them. Corporal Minciok analyzed the Valthor's response patterns from his sensor station. "They are attempting a standard defensive formation, Captain. Predictable. Recommend activation of secondary platforms." Dabin nodded. "Do it." More asteroids revealed their hidden weapons. These platforms were different, equipped with specialized warheads designed specifically to counter Valthor's shielding technology. The missiles did not try to penetrate the shields through brute force. Instead, they detonated just outside the shield envelope, releasing electromagnetic pulses that cascaded through the shield matrix and caused feedback loops in the generators. 3 more. Valthor's cruisers lost their shields simultaneously. Without protection, their hulls were exposed to the sustained fire from the platforms. They did not last long. Engineer Young-ho monitored the weapons platforms from the scout ship's engineering station. "Platform efficiency at 92%, Captain. Ammunition reserves at 60%. We can maintain this rate of fire for another 8 minutes." "More than enough time," Dabin replied. "Hyjin, prepare the scouts for close attack runs. Target the cruisers attempting to coordinate the defense." The 6 human scouts regrouped with impossible synchronization. Their movements controlled by quantum entangled communication systems that allowed them to share data and commands instantaneously. They moved as one mind in 6 bodies, weaving through the asteroid field toward their targets. Prince Kelnus arrived on the flagship's bridge just as another 5 cruisers exploded. He took one look at the tactical display and understood immediately that this was not a battle but a slaughter. "Tavir, we must order a retreat. We have lost 30 ships in 10 minutes. We do not retreat." Tavir's face was red with rage and humiliation. "We are Valthor's. We do not run from primitives. These primitives are destroying our fleet." Kelnus grabbed his brother's arm. "Look at the screen. They planned this. They knew exactly how we would respond. Every move we make, they have already countered. This is not cowardice. This is intelligence." Commander Velrin pushed through the chaos on the bridge to reach the princes. "My lords, Prince Kelnus is correct. The humans have turned this entire asteroid field into a weapon. Our shields are ineffective against their pulse missiles. Our weapons cannot track their scouts. If we remain, we will lose the entire Vanguard." The tactical display showed only 20 cruisers remaining out of the original 50. As they watched, another 2 were torn apart by coordinated fire from multiple platforms. 18 left. Tavor stared at the screen, his mind struggling to accept what was happening. This was supposed to be simple. The humans were supposed to surrender or die quickly. Instead, they had ambushed the Vanguard with tactics and technology that made the Valthor's look primitive. "How?" he whispered. "How did they know?" Captain Dabin could have answered that question. Human intelligence had been monitoring Valthor's communications for months, studying their tactics from past conquests, analyzing their cultural emphasis on direct confrontation and overwhelming force. Every battle the Valthor's had ever fought followed the same pattern: advance in strength, intimidate with numbers, crush resistance with superior firepower. It had worked for centuries against species that fought conventionally. But humanity did not fight conventionally. Humanity fought to win. Another Valthras cruiser exploded. Its reactor overloading after sustained plasma fire melted through its weakened shields. 15 ships left. Prince Kelnus made the decision his brother could not. All ships, retreat immediately. Fall back to the main fleet. This is a direct command from Prince Kelnus. The surviving cruisers did not need to be told twice. They broke off their attack, reversed course, accelerated away from the asteroid field as fast as their engines could manage. The human weapons platforms continued firing until the Valthras ships were out of range, claiming 2 more victims before the survivors escaped. 13 ships out of 50 made it back to the main fleet. The bridge of the flagship fell silent, except for the quiet alarms and status reports. Tavor stood motionless, staring at the tactical display that showed the wreckage of 37 heavy cruisers floating among the asteroids of Arcturus Prime. Each of those ships represented years of construction, crews of hundreds, resources worth more than entire planets. Destroyed in less than 15 minutes by 6 scout ships and a well-prepared ambush. Commander Juan watched the Valthras retreat from the human command center on Arcturus Prime. She allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. Captain Dabin reports all scout ships intact, minimal damage. The platforms performed exactly as predicted. Around her, the command center erupted in quiet celebration. They had faced an enemy fleet of 200 ships with only preparation, intelligence, and superior tactics. The victory was complete, but Jiwan knew this was only the beginning. The Valthras would come again, and next time they would be prepared for ambushes. The real test was yet to come. On the flagship, Prince Tavor finally moved. He turned away from the tactical display and walked toward his chambers without a word. His silence was more frightening than his earlier rage. Prince Kelnus watched him go, then turned to Commander Velron. "Send a message to the main fleet. We advance in full formation. No more vanguards. No more assumptions. We treat these humans as we would treat any peer military force." Velron bowed. "A wise decision, my lord." As he left to relay the orders, Kelnus looked back at the tactical display. At the debris field that marked their humiliating defeat, somewhere in that asteroid field, 6 small human ships had proven that size and numbers meant nothing against an enemy who knew how to fight smart. The real war was about to begin. And for the first time in his life, Prince Kelnus was not certain the Valthras would win. 3 days passed after the disaster at Arcturus Prime, 3 days during which Prince Tavore refused to leave his chambers, refused to speak to anyone, refused to acknowledge the reality of what had happened. Prince Kelnus commanded the fleet in his brother's absence, ordering the ships into a tight defensive formation while scouts probed human territory for information. What they found was not encouraging. Commander Velron presented the latest intelligence to Kelnus in the war room. The humans have evacuated all non-essential personnel from their colonies. They are consolidating their forces at a nebula system the charts identify as Helios. Our scouts detected at least 40 warships gathering there. 40 against our 150, Kelnus said quietly. The numbers favor us, but after Arcturus Prime, I do not trust numbers anymore. Velron nodded. The humans fight unlike any enemy we have encountered. They do not seek glory or territorial expansion. They seek survival, and that makes them unpredictable. Before Kelnus could respond, the door to the war room opened, and Prince Tavir entered. He looked terrible, his face drawn and pale, his eyes red from lack of sleep. But his expression was one of grim determination. "Brother," Kelnus said carefully, "I am glad you have rejoined us." Tavor moved to the tactical display, studying the positions of both fleets. When he spoke, his voice was different from before, harder and colder. "I have been thinking about our failure, about how we underestimated these humans. I will not make that mistake again." "Then you agree we should reassess our strategy?" "No." Tavir's eyes were fixed on the display. "I agree that we must change our tactics. But we do not retreat. We do not show weakness. We advance with the full fleet in concentrated formation, and we crush them with overwhelming force. No ambushes this time. No clever traps. Just raw power against power. Kelnus felt a chill run through him. Tavor, that is exactly what they expect us to do. The humans have studied us. They know how we fight, and we will show them that knowledge means nothing against superior strength. Tavor turned to Velron. Commander, prepare the fleet for immediate advance. All ships maintain tight formation. Overlapping shield coverage. Continuous sensor sweeps. If they try another ambush, we will detect it and destroy it. Velron and Kelnus exchanged glances, but both knew there was no point in arguing. The decision was made. The Valthrus fleet advanced toward the Helios Nebula in a formation that resembled a massive armored wall. 150 warships moving as one, their shields creating an overlapping barrier that could withstand tremendous firepower. It was the classic Valthrus battle strategy. Proven effective in dozens of conquests, it would not work against humanity. Admiral Samine stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the Valthrus fleet approach on the long-range sensors. She was a veteran of the unification wars on Earth, conflicts that had taught humanity how to fight against superior numbers with inferior resources. Those lessons had been passed down and refined over centuries. Beside her, Captain Dabin reviewed the tactical data. His scout ships had rejoined the main fleet, their crews tired but proud of their victory. The Valthrus are using a concentrated formation. They expect us to engage directly. They will not get what they expect, Sumin replied. Launch all fighter squadrons. Begin dispersal pattern theta. Communications. Signal all ships to initiate quantum sync protocols. The human fleet began to move, but not in any formation the Valthrus would recognize. Instead of grouping together for mutual protection, the 40 warships spread out across a wide area, each one maintaining perfect awareness of the others through quantum-entangled communication systems. They could share targeting data, coordinate attacks, and respond to threats instantaneously. Functioning as a single organism spread across thousands of kilometers, pilot Junho sat in his fighter cockpit, one of 300 small craft launching from the human carriers. His heart raced with adrenaline, but his hands were steady on the controls. He had trained for this moment his entire career. All fighters, this is Strike Leader, he transmitted. Remember your training. Speed and precision over brute force. We hit them where they are weak, and we do not give them time to respond. Fight smart. Stay alive. The fighters accelerated toward the Valthrus fleet in swarms, moving in patterns designed to confuse traditional targeting systems. Behind them, the human warships began their own approach, spreading out to attack from multiple vectors simultaneously. On the Valthrus flagship, the sensors detected the human fleet's unusual deployment. Officers called out warnings about the dispersed formation, about the fighter swarms, about the unconventional approach patterns. Prince Tavor listened to it all and smiled grimly. They think to confuse us with their scattered formations. Maintain course. Focus all firepower on their capital ships. The fighters are a distraction. Prince Kelnus was not so certain. Brother, their fighters outnumber our point defense capabilities. If they coordinate their attacks, then our shields will protect us, Tavor interrupted. We are Valthrus. We do not fear insects. The two fleets met in the Helios Nebula, and the battle began. The human fighters struck first. Hundreds of small craft swarming around the Valthrus formation like angry hornets. They did not try to penetrate the heavy shields directly. Instead, they targeted specific points, overwhelming individual shield generators with concentrated fire before moving to the next target. The Valthrus point defense systems tried to track them, but the fighters moved with an eye-assisted precision that made them nearly impossible to hit. For every fighter destroyed, 3 more slipped through to deliver their payloads. Then the human warships opened fire, and the Valthrus learned what it meant to face weapons designed specifically to counter their defenses. The plasma cannons on the human ships did not fire conventional projectiles. Instead, they released streams of superheated particles that, when they struck a shield, created cascade reactions in the energy matrix. The shields did not fail from the impact, but from internal feedback loops that caused the generators to overload and explode. medical. Officer Hannah watched the battle from her station in the medical bay. Treating wounded pilots as they returned from the fight, she saw young men and women with burns and injuries, but their eyes were bright with determination. They knew what they were fighting for. Not glory or conquest, but survival. The right to exist without bowing to alien masters. The first Valthrus ship lost its shields 12 minutes into the battle, without protection. Its hull was exposed to sustained fire from 3 human warships that had coordinated their attack through quantum sync. The cruiser broke apart under the onslaught. Prince Tavera watched it happen with growing horror. This was impossible. The shields were supposed to be impenetrable. The formation was supposed to be unbreakable. But the humans were not fighting the way they were supposed to fight. All ships concentrate fire on the nearest human vessel, he commanded. Destroy it. 10 Valthrus ships turned their weapons on a single human destroyer. The combined firepower should have vaporized it instantly, but the destroyer's shields held long enough for it to execute an emergency jump. Vanishing from space and reappearing several kilometers away, damaged but intact, before the Valthrus could retarget, 2 more of their ships lost their shields to fighter attacks. Admiral Sumin watched the battle unfold exactly as planned. The Valthrus were strong, but they were predictable. They fought like they always fought, with overwhelming direct force. Humanity fought with coordination, adaptation, and technology specifically designed to counter enemy strengths. Helm, execute flanking maneuver 7, she ordered. Weapons, prepare the quantum torpedoes. Let us show them what happens when you bring tradition to a war of innovation. The human fleet split into 3 groups, each one attacking a different section of the Valthrus formation simultaneously. The quantum torpedoes, experimental weapons that could phase through conventional shields, struck deep into the Valthrus ranks. More ships exploded or lost critical systems. Prince Kelnus grabbed his brother's arm. Tavir, we have lost 60 ships. We must retreat. We are Valthrus. Tavora shouted, but his voice cracked with desperation. We do not retreat. An explosion rocked the flagship as fighters penetrated its point defenses and struck the shield generators. Alarms screamed across the bridge. The ship was losing power. Kelnus made his decision. He struck his brother hard across the face, stunning him into silence. Then he turned to the communications officer. All ships, this is Prince Kelnus. Execute full retreat. Immediate withdrawal from the combat zone. All vessels fall back to rally point designated as Sanctuary. The remaining Valthrus ships did not hesitate. They turned and fled, their faster-than-light drives engaging as soon as they cleared the interference from the nebula. Behind them, 90 ships remained as burning wrecks or dead hulks floating in space. The Valthrus 7th Conquest Fleet had entered human space with 200 ships. After 2 battles, only 90 remained functional. The throne room of Emperor Drachnus was a chamber designed to inspire fear and awe. Massive pillars of black stone rose to a ceiling lost in shadows. The floor was polished metal that reflected the light from energy torches along the walls. At the far end, elevated above all others, sat the throne itself. Carved from a single piece of star metal, taken from the first world the Valthrus had ever conquered, Emperor Drachnus sat upon that throne. Ancient beyond measure, his face carved with lines of power and cruelty. He had ruled the Valthrus Empire for over a century, expanding its borders through conquest after conquest. Never in his reign had a Valthrus fleet been defeated. Never had his commanders returned home, with their heads bowed in shame, until now. Prince Tavor and Prince Kelnus knelt before their father, their heads touching the cold floor. Around them stood the members of the imperial court, watching with expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed satisfaction. High Counselor Morven stood closest to the throne, his eyes gleaming with opportunity. "Explain," Emperor Drachnus said. The single word echoed through the chamber like thunder. Prince Kelnus spoke, his voice steady despite his fear. "Father, we encountered an enemy unlike any the Empire has faced before. The humans possess technology and tactics that counter our traditional strategies. They do not fight for glory or conquest, but for survival and that makes them silence. Dracnus raised one hand, and Kelnus fell quiet immediately. The Emperor's eyes shifted to Taver. You commanded this fleet. You promised me an easy victory to prove your worth. Instead, you return with barely half your ships and tales of defeat at the hands of a species that has existed in space for less time than I have sat on this throne. Explain. Taver's voice shook as he spoke. Father, they ambushed us. They knew our tactics, predicted our movements. Their weapons are designed specifically to counter our shields. Their ships move with coordination impossible for conventional communication systems. We fought bravely, but you lost. Dracnus stood from his throne, descending the steps toward his sons. He was tall, even for a Valthris, and his presence seemed to fill the chamber. You lost because you underestimated an enemy. You lost because you believed strength alone was enough. You lost because you are arrogant fools who thought birthright made you warriors. High Counselor Morven stepped forward, bowing respectfully. Your Majesty, if I may speak, this disaster demonstrates that the princes are not ready for military command. Perhaps more experienced commanders should be assigned to deal with the human situation while your sons receive additional training. The suggestion was clear. Strip the princes of their positions, give Morven's allies control of the fleets, diminish the royal family's power. It was a political attack disguised as practical advice. Emperor Dracnus stared at Morven for a long moment, then turned back to his sons. Tell me everything about these humans. Leave nothing out. The next hour, Kelnus presented the intelligence reports. He spoke of humanity's history, their rapid technological development, their approach to warfare as a science rather than a ritual. He described how human ships shared information instantaneously through quantum-entangled systems, how their weapons were designed to exploit specific weaknesses in Valthris technology, how their tactics prioritized efficiency over honor. Dracnus listened in silence. When Kelnus finished, the Emperor returned to his throne and sat heavily. For the first time, the members of the court saw something in his expression that they had never seen before. Uncertainty. These humans, Dracnus said slowly, evolved through constant warfare. Every generation refined their understanding of combat. They have been fighting and studying war longer than we have existed as a spacefaring species. Yes, Father, Kelnus confirmed. They are young in space, but ancient in warfare, Morven interjected again. Surely, Your Majesty, this does not change the fundamental reality. We have greater numbers, more territory, superior resources. If we commit the full strength of the Empire, we would lose, Dracnus said flatly. The court gasped. Did you not hear what my son described? The humans do not fight as we fight. They do not care about honor or glory. They care only about winning. If we send 10 fleets, they will destroy 10 fleets with tactics we cannot counter. If we send 100 fleets, they will study our patterns and develop new tactics. They will adapt faster than we can respond because adaptation is in their nature. The Emperor stood again, pacing before his throne. I have spent my life conquering species that fought predictably. Species that valued honor over victory, tradition over effectiveness. The humans are something new, something dangerous. On the human capital world of New Sol, President Yemen sat in a conference room with his military and civilian advisors. The holographic displays showed the current positions of both fleets, the human defensive perimeter, and projections of Valthris capabilities. Admiral Sumin delivered her report. The Valthris fleet has withdrawn to a position 3 systems away from our border. They have not made any hostile moves since the battle in Helios Nebula. Intelligence suggests internal political turmoil in their command structure. Captain Dabin, now promoted to Commodore for his actions at Arcturus Prime, added his analysis. The Valthris are debating their next move. They expected an easy conquest and received 2 devastating defeats. Their culture is built on dominance and superiority. These losses have shaken their confidence. Diplomat Soyan leaned forward. This gives us an opportunity. If we act now, we can offer them a way to save face while achieving peace. A formal treaty that establishes borders and mutual recognition of sovereignty. President Yemen considered this carefully. He was a thoughtful man, elected not for his military experience but for his diplomatic skill and his ability to see beyond immediate threats to long-term stability. The question is whether they will accept such a treaty. Their entire culture seems built on the idea of their own superiority. They may not have a choice, Sumin said. We have demonstrated that we can defend ourselves. If they attack again, they will lose more ships. Eventually, even the proudest empire must acknowledge reality. Soyin pulled up a document she had been preparing. I propose we send them a formal communication. Not a threat, but an offer. We acknowledge their strength, while making clear we will defend our territory. We propose defined borders, non-aggression pacts, and trade agreements that benefit both sides. We give them a path to peace that does not require them to admit defeat. Dabin frowned. Will that work? Their princes seemed more concerned with glory than practicality. The princes made those decisions, Soyin replied. But they answer to their emperor, and emperors must think about their empires, not just their pride. We offer Drachnus a way to end this conflict without losing everything. Yemen made his decision. Draft the communication. Make it formal, respectful, but absolutely clear about our position. We will defend ourselves if necessary, but we prefer peace. Send it through all diplomatic channels to ensure it reaches the emperor directly. Back in the Valtherus throne room, Emperor Drachnus had made his own decision. He looked at his sons, still kneeling before him. You will not be stripped of your positions. Morven's suggestion is rejected. Morven's face showed his disappointment, but he bowed and stepped back. However, Drachnus continued. You will not command fleets again until you have proven you understand what you face. Kelnus, you will study everything we know about human warfare. You will become an expert in their tactics, their technology, their thinking. Tavor, you will work with our scientists to develop countermeasures to human weapons. You will both demonstrate that you can learn from defeat, or you will find yourselves commanding nothing but your own shame. The princes bowed deeper. Yes, father. Drachnus turned to address the full court. The Empire faces a new challenge. We cannot conquer the humans through traditional means. We must adapt, or we must seek alternative solutions. I will consider all options, including ones we have never needed before. The word hung unspoken in the air. Peace. 3 days later, the human communication arrived. Emperor Drachnus read it in private, alone in his chambers. The message was clear. Humanity did not seek war, but they would not submit. They offered coexistence, mutual benefit, the chance to avoid further bloodshed. For a long time, Drachnus stared at the message. Then he called for his advisors and his sons. The Empire would respond. And that response would determine the future of two civilizations. 6 months had passed since.
Atlas.
The battles at Arcturus Prime and Helios Nebula. 6 months of silence along the border between human and Valtherus space. No attacks, no provocations, only careful watching from both sides. But today, that silence would end. The neutral space station designated as Meeting Point 7 floated in the void between the two territories. A structure built by neither civilization but maintained by both as a gesture of tentative trust. It was small, just large enough for a conference room and basic life support. But it represented something larger, the possibility of peace. Prince Kelnus arrived first. His single ship docking with the station hours before the scheduled meeting, he walked through the empty corridors alone, his guards ordered to remain on the ship. The past 6 months had changed him. He had spent every day studying human warfare, reading their history, analyzing their tactics. What he learned had shaken everything he believed about strength and superiority. Commander. Velrun had accompanied him on the journey and now stood beside him in the conference room. Are you prepared for this, my lord? Kelnus looked at the empty chairs across the table. I do not know if prepared is the right word, but I understand now what we face. The humans are not simply another species to be conquered. They are survivors who have refined the art of war across thousands of years. To them, conflict is not about glory, but about ensuring their continued existence. The door opened, and the human delegation entered. President Yemen led them, flanked by diplomat Soyan and Commodore Dabin. All three wore formal attire. Neither military uniforms nor casual clothes, striking a balance between respect and neutrality. Kelness stood and bowed in the Valthras manner, a gesture of acknowledgement, if not quite submission. President Yemen, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Yemen returned the gesture with a formal nod. Prince Kelness, we appreciate your willingness to negotiate. Please, let us sit and discuss how our people can coexist peacefully. Negotiations began carefully, each side testing the other with words instead of weapons. The basic framework was simple. Establish clear borders, agree to non-aggression terms, open limited trade channels. But beneath these practical matters lay deeper questions about respect, sovereignty, and the fundamental assumptions each species held about the other. Diplomat. Soyan handled the detailed terms with practiced skill. She had studied Valthras culture as intensely as Kelness had studied human warfare, and she knew how to phrase things in ways that would not offend their pride while still protecting human interests. The proposed border would follow the existing territorial claims, she explained. Highlighting regions on a holographic star map, neither side would expand beyond these boundaries without mutual agreement. Trade would begin with mineral exchanges and cultural goods, expanding as trust develops. Kelness studied the map carefully. The borders were fair, dividing resource-rich systems equally. The humans were not trying to take advantage of their military victories. They simply wanted security and recognition. These terms are acceptable, he said slowly. But I must ask a question that has troubled me for months. You defeated our fleet twice, inflicted casualties that should have broken our will to fight. You could have pressed Y. Our advantage invaded our territory while we were weak. Why did you not? President Yemen leaned back in his chair. Because conquest was never our goal, Prince Kelness. We did not fight you to destroy the Valthras Empire. We fought to protect our freedom. The moment you stopped threatening that freedom, we had no reason to continue the conflict. But you could have gained territory, resources, prestige. Is that not the purpose of war? Commodore Dabin spoke for the first time, his voice quiet but firm. War has no purpose, Prince Kelness. It is a tool, nothing more. A tool we use only when necessary, and set aside the moment it is no longer needed. We do not fight for glory or to prove our strength. We fight to survive, and when survival is assured, we stop fighting. This concept seemed to genuinely puzzle Kelness. Then what drives you? What gives meaning to your military victories if not the expansion of power? Soyan answered this time. The knowledge that our children will grow up free, that our people can pursue their own dreams without bowing to foreign masters. That is worth more than any conquered territory or tribute from defeated enemies. The words hung in the air. Kelness felt something shift in his understanding. For his entire life, he had been taught that strength meant dominance, that victory meant conquest, that the purpose of having power was to expand it over others. But the humans saw power differently. They saw it as a shield, not a sword. Your culture confuses me, Kelness admitted. But I am beginning to understand why you are so dangerous. You do not fight for reasons we can predict or counter. You fight for survival, and that makes you willing to pay any cost, use any tactic, adapt in any way necessary. Yemen nodded slowly. That is accurate. But it also means that when the threat to our survival ends, we are willing to become the most peaceful of neighbors. We have no interest in your territory, Prince Kelness. We simply want you to have no interest in ours. The negotiations continued for 3 more hours, working through the details of enforcement mechanisms, dispute resolution, and the gradual building of trust between species. When they finally reached an agreement, Soyan produced a formal treaty document, written in both languages. This treaty establishes peace between our peoples, she said. It recognizes the sovereignty of both civilizations and creates a framework for coexistence. All it requires are signatures from authorized representatives. Read through the document one final time. It was fair, balanced, and comprehensive. It gave the Valthras everything they needed: while protecting human interests completely. It was, he realized, exactly the kind of treaty that should have been signed before any blood was shed. He signed his name with the traditional Valthras seal President Yemen signed below. Using the formal, presidential signature of the United Human Colonies, the treaty was complete, as the formal proceedings ended. And the tension in the room relaxed slightly. Kelness asked if he could speak with Commodore Dabin privately. The others agreed and stepped out, leaving the Valthras prince and the human officer alone. "I need to understand something," Kelness said. "The ambush at Arcturus Prime, you predicted our every move. The Vanguard advanced exactly as you expected, followed the exact path you prepared. How? How did you know what we would do before we did it?" Dabin considered his answer carefully. "We studied your history, Prince Kelness. Every battle the Valthras have ever fought, every conquest, every tactical decision made by your commanders. We saw patterns in how you think, how you value direct confrontation and overwhelming force. We understood your culture values honor and displays of strength. Once we understood who you are, predicting what you would do became possible." "You did not predict our moves," Kelness said quietly, understanding dawning. "You predicted our thinking?" "Yes." "And that is the difference between you and us. You fight based on tradition and honor. We fight based on understanding our enemies so completely that we can turn their strengths into weaknesses. You could only see one path forward, because your culture taught you there was only one honorable way to fight. We saw 100 paths because we had no such restrictions." Kelness sat down heavily. "Then we were defeated before we even arrived," Dabin said firmly. "You were only defeated if you learned nothing. But you are here, negotiating peace instead of planning another attack. You studied our warfare instead of dismissing it. You changed your approach instead of repeating your failures. That is adaptation, Prince Kelness. That is learning. And that means you are more dangerous now than you were 6 months ago." "Dangerous to you?" Dabin smiled slightly. "No. Dangerous to the old version of yourself. The prince who thought strength alone was enough. That prince would have refused this treaty and led his people to destruction. The prince, sitting here now, understands that true strength sometimes means knowing when not to fight." They talked for another hour, discussing tactics and strategy like colleagues rather than enemies. Dabin explained how human quantum sync systems worked, how their weapons were designed to counter specific Valthras technologies. Kelness shared information about Valthras shield systems and tactical doctrines. It was an exchange of knowledge between warriors who respected each other's capabilities. When they finally rejoined the others, both carried themselves differently. The treaty was signed, but more than that, a foundation of mutual understanding had been established. 10 years passed. The treaty held. Trade flourished along the border, with both civilizations benefiting from the exchange of goods and ideas. There were occasional disputes, border incidents, and misunderstandings. But the framework established in that first meeting provided ways to resolve them without violence. Prince Kelness rose to become the Imperial Defense Minister. Having reformed Valthras military doctrine based on lessons learned from humanity, the Empire did not abandon its traditions entirely, but it incorporated new ideas about flexibility, adaptation, and the importance of understanding enemies rather than simply overpowering them. Commodore Dabin became Admiral Dabin. Commanding the human defensive forces along the Valthras border, he occasionally shared tactical analyses with Kelness, both men recognizing that a strong defense on both sides made peace more stable. In a small office on New Sol, President Yemen read a report about the anniversary of the treaty signing. 10 years of peace. 10 years of proving that different species could coexist without domination or submission. It was not perfect, and there were still those on both sides who harbored old grudges and suspicions. But it was working. Diplomat Soyin entered his office, carrying data on the latest trade figures. "The economic integration is progressing well, Mr. President. Both sides are benefiting from the partnership." Yemen smiled. "Good. Peace built on mutual benefit is more stable than peace built on fear. On the Valthras throne world, Emperor Drachnus read similar reports in his private chambers. He was older now, his long reign finally showing signs of ending. But he had lived long enough to see his empire survive its first real defeat and emerge stronger for it. Prince Tavor had also changed over the years. The arrogant young prince who had led the Seventh Conquest Fleet to disaster had become a thoughtful scientist. Working on technology development rather than military command, he had learned in his own way the lessons his brother had learned faster. The galaxy had learned something too. Word of the Valthrus defeat and subsequent peace had spread to other species and civilizations. Humanity was no longer unknown. They were recognized as a species that could defend themselves, that fought with intelligence rather than just strength, and that preferred peace when their survival was assured. The single clash at Arcturus Prime, followed by the battle at Helios Nebula, had cost the Valthrus princes everything they had sought: easy conquest, military glory, the expansion of their empire through force. But in losing those things, they had gained something unexpected and perhaps more valuable: knowledge. That there were still things in the universe that could challenge them. Still lessons to learn, still ways to grow beyond their old certainties, and for humanity. The conflict had proven what they had always believed: that survival did not require being the strongest or the largest or the oldest civilization. It required being smart, adaptable, and willing to fight when necessary while seeking peace when possible. The story of the Valthrus, princes and the human scouts, became a lesson taught in military academies on both sides. Not a lesson about the glory of war, but about the cost of underestimating your enemy, the value of understanding over assumption, and the wisdom of knowing when to fight and when to make peace. In the end, the single clash had cost the Valthrus princes their pride, their ships, and their belief in their own invincibility. But it had taught them something more important: that respect earned through strength, recognized and acknowledged, is more lasting than submission forced through conquest, and that was a lesson worth the price.